Hey everybody, it's Paul with reporting live from my sofa. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my channel if it's your first time here. So today we're going to be discussing a case that actually took place here in North Carolina at Fort Bragg. And many of you might know this case by the familiar book title, Fatal Vision. There's also a TV movie series that came out about it called Fatal Vision. So this is a case of Jeffrey MacDonald. He was the Army surgeon that's currently serving 3 life sentences for the murder of his pregnant wife and his 2 daughters. Now look, this is a really old case that spans all the way from 1970, and there's a lot of twists, there's a lot of turns, and there is a lot of evidence. Now because of that, there's many different ways that people view this case, and for that reason, I'm going to be doing an overview in this video. As you saw from the thumbnail, this is part 1, and so what I want to do with this series is to kind of go off little tangents after this first video so that we can each go down the rabbit hole of each aspect, whether it's evidence or suspects and whatnot. So that being said, I love discussing these cases with y'all. I love hearing other opinions. So please feel free to start a conversation down in the comment section below. And let's get started. So let's go over a brief overview of what took place on the night of the murders. Now shortly I'm going to be displaying some of the photographs of the crime scene, and I've excluded using pictures that depict the victims and whatnot because I just feel that it's too disturbing. But the photographs that I'm going to show do show the crime scene after the victims were removed, so there is still a lot of blood. So just be aware of that if that's something that bothers you. Okay, let's get into it. So February 17th, 1970 at 3:42 a.m., Jeffrey MacDonald placed a phone call to the Fort Bragg dispatch, and that resulted in the military police officers responding to his home. Now, at their arrival, the officers found the mutilated bodies of his wife Colette, who was pregnant, and his 2 daughters, Kimberly and Kristen. Now, Jeffrey was found laying across his wife's chest, and he had sustained like 1 stab wound kind of to his side that resulted in puncturing his lung. And he had some superficial wounds and whatnot, and I'm going to get into those in a little bit when we go over the evidence. So an officer did give McDonald mouth to mouth a few times. He seemed to be going in and out of consciousness, and Jeffrey MacDonald would be the only survivor of that evening. Now MacDonald would go on to claim that he was attacked by a black man with a club and 2 white males with knives, and he would also state that there was a female standing in the background chanting "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." Now he described this woman as wearing a blonde wig with white boots and a floppy hat on, and that's going to become more relevant here in a little bit when we discuss that. Now also they found the word pig that was written in blood on the headboard of Jeffrey and Colette's bed. Now this was very similar to the Manson murders that had taken place just 7 months prior. So once they got in there and they started sorting things out, the investigators and whatnot, there were some things about the evidence in the crime scene that didn't really make sense to them. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that now. Now, like I said before, there's a lot of evidence to go over in this case, and I'm going to go over a few aspects of the evidence in this current video, but when we reach into subsequent parts of the series, I want to go down different rabbit holes for different parts of the evidence because there's just so much to go over. Now, one of the first aspects that seemed kind of weird to the investigators was the lack of disturbance and disarray in the apartment. There was really very little undone in the apartment to match up with the struggle like MacDonald described. Now, as you can see from the pictures right here, there was a coffee table on its side, and this is the area that MacDonald claimed that he was attacked. And if you compare these photos to some of the photos that you're going to see momentarily to the bedrooms where his family members were attacked, there's really no comparison to them. And his family's, there's lots of blood, there's lots of disarray, and then when you look at the area that he was attacked in, there's really nothing there. There's an upside down, there's a coffee table put on its side. So this really struck them as weird. Now, another thing that took place is when one of the investigators entered the house, the apartment, he noted that he saw some plates that were, remained unbalanced on an unstable china cabinet, some Valentine's Day cards that were sitting upright on the table, and little things like that that just didn't seem to really fit an area where a bunch of grown men were having a huge struggle with each other. So take a look at the photos again one more time of the crime scene things and just kind of take in that difference there that you see. So let's talk about the murder weapons. Now you're going to see me post some pictures up here of the various areas that the murder weapons were found in, as well as the murder weapons. Now investigators would find an ice pick and an old hickory knife about 20 feet from the back door, and they were lying side by side beneath a bush. Now they found their placement weird, and they thought it was kind of odd that if a group of people were running from a house, how did these get laid out so perfectly? And also in the house, a dull paring knife with a bent blade was found near Colette's body in the master bedroom. And future analysis of that knife showed that that knife was what caused the 2 cuts in Jeffrey MacDonald's pajama top. Now, a club was also used for the bludgeoning blows. And eventually it was shown that the club was made from a wood slat that came from Kimberly's bed. And the club itself bore traces of Colette's type A blood and Kimberly's type AB blood. Now, also after the testing was done, there would be 2 pajama seam threads that were found stuck to the club in Colette's blood. And additional trace evidence found in the club included 2 unsourced dark woolen fibers, as well as some multiple fibers sourced to a throw rug in the master bedroom. And then there were several unsourced animal hairs stuck to it. Now, autopsy records would show and concluded that the blunt trauma injuries to Colette and Kimberly were the result of blows from the club. Wood splinters from the club were found in Colette's left hand, under her body, on top of the master bed, under the bed covers in Kimberly's room, and on top of the bed in Kristen's room. So you can see how this club kind of traveled to each scene. But however, there were no wood splinters found in the living room where Jeffrey MacDonald claimed that he was struck with it. Now, lastly, about the crime scene that the investigators thought was really weird is that it was a rainy night and there was no signs that one would expect to see if a group of people came into a house from that and then fled. There was no mud, there was no wet areas, there was no water. So this was just another aspect that they found really odd about that. So let's talk about the pajama top. So MacDonald's pajama top was found folded up over Colette's chest. And he stated that he took the pajama top off and put it there when he couldn't revive her. And the top had 48 ice pick puncture wounds in it. Now, MacDonald had only sustained 1 puncture wound, and he said that the top had been pulled over his head or come off in some fashion while he was being attacked and they were trying to stab him. And that was another aspect that just kind of seemed weird to investigators. You know, they wanted to know how he could fend off this awful attack with his pajama top and it receive all these puncture wounds, but him not really get any major defense wounds over it. Now, the prosecution would eventually allege that the top could be folded in such a way to align with the 21 stab wounds in Colette's chest. So, to them, it appeared that the top had been used to put over her before the attack actually happened. So in regards to the injuries, MacDonald had only sustained 1 puncture wound, which partially collapsed his right lung. Once he got to the hospital, they determined that his vitals were all pretty good. And the doctor also noted that he had a bruise on his forehead that was moderately swollen. Now, there was a superficial laceration on his upper left arm, a small puncture wound on his lower anterior chest, and a superficial laceration on his upper left abdomen. And there was a very small superficial laceration on his left index finger. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures that were taken in 1974 of MacDonald. These were taken by the FBI for a grand jury hearing. And these pictures depict the scars that he had 4 years after the attack on him that night. Now, I'm not going to post pictures of the other victims because they're too disturbing and graphic. They involve children, and it's just nothing that I really want to put out there. But as I describe them, just note the difference in what you're able to see here with MacDonald's scars and how he was able to escape with in comparison to what took place to his family. So Colette McDonald, again, his pregnant wife, she had severe blunt trauma to the head, and she was struck at least 6 times, causing lacerations that went all the way to the bone. And Colette also sustained 9 deep knife wounds at the front of her neck, 7 deep wounds that were... Hold on one second. 7 deep knife wounds to her chest and 21 puncture wounds to her chest area. Kimberly Mcdonald, one of the daughters, she was struck at least 3 times in the head with a blunt object, and Kimberly's right cheek, right ear, and right mastoid area had overlapping black and blue marks with irregular abrasions. Now, her right eye was recessed, and she had a fractured nose, which was deviated to the right, and her left cheekbone was fractured, and a piece of the cheekbone was actually protruding through the skin. Her skull showed multiple fractures, and the dome portion of her skull was fractured all the way through its entire thickness and slightly dislocated. She also had 8 to 10 deep knife wounds that were found on the right side of her neck. So the child was mutilated. I mean, she was just absolutely barbarically attacked. Now, the other daughter, Christy Mcdonald, she sustained 12 gaping knife wounds to her upper back, 4 knife wounds to the chest, and 1 wound to the neck. Now, 2 of the wounds to her back penetrated her heart, causing massive internal bleeding. There were 15 shallow puncture wounds that were found in her chest, as well as multiple cuts on both of her hands. There was a through-and-through laceration of the skin involving the middle of the right ring finger, and the laceration was deep enough to expose the bone, and the index finger of the right hand revealed a triangular flap of skin. So as you can see, I mean, these were just a brutal, attack on all 3 of these family members. And McDonald's just wasn't that bad. I mean, collapsed lung isn't that horrible when you compare it to what took place here. So obviously, the discrepancy in the attacks and the injuries on the family raised many questions to the investigators. Why would the intruder show up with no murder weapons? Why allow the male to live with minor wounds? And why brutally attack the women and children? It just wasn't that common for something. So here we go. Let's continue. So all of these oddities with the case and things just not lining up led to McDonald being questioned. And on April 6, 1970, McDonald was questioned by the CDI investigators, and he was charged with his family's murder by the end of that interview. Now, after a very exhaustive pre-court martial hearing, he was actually exonerated and honorably discharged from the Army in December of 1970. So at this point, he is seemingly a free man, so he is free to go and do as he pleases, and he did just that. But his public appearances would be what began to unravel the case for him. Now, McDonald would later go on to the Dick Cavett talk show in December of 1970, and during the interview, he complained about how the military treated him, the military authorities, and he pretty much just came across as very nonchalant about the demise of his family. And as you all can imagine, this did not go over well with the public at all. And they really just felt that he was more concerned about himself than he was his family. He did not portray any kind of emotion that somebody expected a person to portray who had just lived through a situation like this. Now, also watching this show was McDonald's former father-in-law, Frankie Kassab. And up until the point of that show, he supported McDonald and he believed in him. But after he saw that show, he no longer did. And another mistake that McDonald would make for the father-in-law is that at one point, McDonald would tell the father-in-law that he had actually tracked down one of the killers and murdered them. Now, obviously, Frankie figured this out very easily, that this was a lie. And McDonald would later say that he made the lie up to essentially get Frankie off of his back and keep him quiet. So Kassab, eventually, when he saw all this go down, he began pressuring the authorities to reinvestigate McDonald. And after 5 years in 1975, he was brought to trial as a civilian in North Carolina. And that's where a jury found him guilty and sentenced him to 3 life sentences in 1979. And now again, for the timeline purposes, the murders took place in 1970, and it's 1979 that he's actually convicted of them. So this would actually work to his benefit in getting a new trial. And in 1980, a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals reverses his convictions and says that the 9-year delay violated his speedy trial rights. So he's a free man again. But by 1982, the U.S. Supreme Court reverses the Fourth Circuit, and McDonald's rearrested and returned to prison again. Now again, Michael's public crusade did not do him any favors. Leading up to the trial, McDonald had recruited Joe McGinnis to write about the case to help pay for his legal fees. However, McGinnis began to feel like McDonald was guilty, and when his book Fatal Vision was published in 1983, it didn't do McDonald any favors. So McDonald would actually go on to sue McGinnis for breach of contract because I guess he expected the book to only make him look good. And the case actually went to trial and it ended in a hung jury. And McGinnis's insurance agents, they didn't want to go to another expensive trial, so they just settled out of court. But the damage had already been done. This book was a major bestseller. A movie followed. Many of us can remember the movie and read the book, and it's what made it famous. Now, it was looked upon in the industry The McGinnises had essentially led McDonald on the whole time. It looked like he was making it like he believed in his innocence to kind of saddle up to the case and get information. And the relationship actually became fodder for many articles and studies in regards to reporters and their subjects. And interestingly enough, another book by Janet Malcolm called The Journalist and the Murderer, it eviscerated McGinnis's approach, and it has since become a classic on journalistic ethics. Now, all of this sounds pretty clean-cut and simple so far, right? Case closed. Absolutely not. That is why we're here, still talking about this. Let me introduce you to the world of Helena Stoeckley. Now, allegedly, on the night of the murders in 1970, when officers arrived to the house, one of them made note that they saw a woman standing on a corner near the McDonald residence that matched the description that McDonald would eventually give of the woman who was standing in the background during the attack, chanting, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." So, that said woman on the night of the murder, though, was not followed up with. And so let's talk about Helena Stoeckley. She first tried inserting herself into this case just a couple of days after the murders took place. Now, as of now, she is dead. She's deceased. She died in January 14th, 1983. She was a known drug user that lived in Fayetteville near Fort Bragg, and she had actually worked as an informant for the police officers on a few occasions, drug stuff and whatnot. Now, she would go on to confess that she was at 544 Castle Drive the night of the murders, and even though she admitted to being there the night of the murders, and she would stand by this claim over the years, she also retracted that statement many times. She even went as far as when she was on the witness stand to claim that she forgot what happened during that time. So, other times she also claimed that she had an affair with McDonald. Other times she said that they were trying to buy drugs from McDonald. And then she even went on to do a television interview confessing to the murders as being part of a satanic cult that she was part of. And she implicated other people in the case throughout the years. Most of them were all checked out. All of them were checked out. And again, we're going to go into all those people and the actual dynamics of the specifics of that in a separate video because it's a huge rabbit hole to go down. But she's allegedly also gave a deathbed confession that McDonald was innocent and that what she's been saying is true. So at the end of it all, though, she was just essentially viewed as an unreliable witness, and it was kind of looked at like she was either being spoon-fed information or she was just making things up or just kind of one of those people that attaches themselves to a crime. And now other things would help fuel the fodder of the Helena Stoeckley theory. Enter Jimmy Britt, federal marshal. This would be another person and aspect of the case to fuel the Helena Stoeckley theory. So 25 years after McDonald's trial, Britt came forward with information, and he stated that he drove Stoeckley from Greenville, South Carolina to Raleigh, North Carolina to attend the trial. He also stated that on the drive there, she told him that she was in the house when the murders occurred. And Britt also claimed that he observed prosecutor James Blackburn in a pretrial meeting threatened Stoeckley and with prosecution if she testified that she was at McDonald's house. And this is the point that when she got on the stand, she all of a sudden forgot her testimony of being at the house. Now, Blackburn has denied this, and he stated that Britt was not even present at this meeting. And later at another hearing in Wilmington, North Carolina, it was stated that Britt couldn't have driven Stoeckley because several marshals did that job, and he wasn't one of them. So this is another murky aspect of the case that is worth diving into a little bit deeper, but that also flames the fire for the case that we know today as Fatal Vision. Now, in January of 2017, McDonald filed a federal appeal based on this new evidence, and this also included 3 hairs that were found at the scene that don't match the family's DNA. An affidavit alleging that the trial prosecutor did in fact intimidate Stoeckley into lying on the witness stand. Now, the unidentified DNA was also not a match for Stoeckley's DNA, and so that kind of threw a wrench in that system, but his attorneys stated that they didn't really care, that this proves that there was an intruder. Now, as of December 2018, his requests for a new trial have all been denied, and the 2014 standing does continue to stand. So essentially at this point, McDonald's is back to square one. But he still is claiming his innocence. He still is fighting the case as best as he can. He is 75 years old at this point. Excuse me, his birthday was October 12th, 1943. This makes this one of the longest running trials that there was. Now, he's serving his sentence out in Cumberland, Maryland at a federal correctional institution that's also a medium security facility. And he also got married in 2002. He married a woman named Catherine Curich, I believe I'm saying that right. And she has stood by his side the entire time, claiming his innocence as well, and helping him to fight this case. Now that's going to conclude the overview video here, part one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this can start some dialogue about this case. A lot of you that I've talked to in the live chats remember this case, and you remember things about it or the movie, but a lot of people haven't looked back into it for a long time. So I'm interested to see if there's certain aspects of this that you want to pursue. And like I said, what I'm going to do is be making continual sequels to this part one so that we can discuss each aspect of this further in detail. So if you're still hanging with me, I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed looking into this case. And that's it. I hope to talk to y'all soon about it in the comment section on the live feeds. Y'all take care.